Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, founder of the podcast, as well as Thrive Meetings and Events. We here on the Eating at a Meeting podcast talk to experts in all facets of food and beverage to learn more about how we can create safe, sustainable, and inclusive experiences with the food and beverage that we serve, whether you're hosting a staff meeting or a gala for 500 or a food festival. We talk to chefs and farmers and eaters and doctors. And today I've got a guest who has been in the industry for 25 years, designing and negotiating culinary events for major companies such as Delta Airlines, IBM, Coca Cola, and Kimberly Clark. Claire Gould helps people decide what people are going to eat, as well as gives advice on food and beverage choices, negotiations, and presentations. Hey, Claire, how are you doing?
Good. I should think to myself, drum roll, please. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm very excited and mostly very honored to be here today. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And you and I have known each other for a long time from Atlanta.
Long time. Yes. Yes.
So we go way back.
We go way back. But before we get started, I really got to give you a shout out because I read on social that you're probably hit your 1,000th person on your Facebook Live room on culinary, and you do sustainability. So I saw that. I thought, you know what? You're sustaining the industry with 1,000 folks and growing. So congratulations to all the great success that you're having. So you put your heart and soul into it, and that's what we love, and that's what makes us good at what we do. So congratulations to you and all the good you're putting out to our industry and for continuing education. So thank you.
Thanks, Claire. I really appreciate that. And for everybody that wants to know, that is the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group, and that is free to join. And we just talk about all things food and beverage, again, to help educate us. And so it's a continuation of this podcast in a different format. So please feel free to join. Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. And majority of the people are meeting planners, which is great. We do have some hoteliers in there, so it's always good to learn from both sides of the table.
And it's also good for the people that like to do at-home entertaining as well. Like they don't think to plug into that, but you learn so much, just like you and I just learned so much, from the podcast, the webinar that we were just on. So everybody really, if they like any type of form of entertaining, and you got these at-home chefs that are addicted to Food Network, your Facebook group is a perfect place for them to really get some continuing education and let them better their passion of entertaining in their home space from professionals like us.
Definitely. And it does. And I, the other day I posted an article. Unfortunately, it was about a tragedy of a young boy dying from consuming milk. And because his parents thought lactose-free meant it was dairy-free. And,
oh God.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that, because lactose is the actual sugar in the milk, where whey and casein is the protein. And, so we have to be more diligent about understanding what food that we're serving. And, that's just one level of education that I'm providing in there. And the more we know, the better off we can provide catering experiences, even, at home. And that's really important if you're having somebody over to your house. So,
because people don't think when they entertain in their home to ask, and that sometimes if you don't know the people that well, or if you're, if it's your spouse or your partner, you're going to their in-laws' house, you're going to someone's house, and, they'll just be like, oh, I won't eat at all, as opposed to really speaking up. And also at home people don't really understand as well that, soy sauce isn't gluten-free. Like, who
Right.
knew?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's all it really, what you're doing touch points a lot of different areas that would be applicable to anybody who wants to have someone over for dinner.
Yeah. And I found last week, or I just saw it on my Facebook feed, this woman posted in a celiac group. It's just a group of people who have celiac disease or have kids who have them. And she's like, well, what do you do? The question she posed out to everybody is like, what do you do when you go over to somebody's house?
Yep.
Do you expect them to make the food for you, or what do you do? And majority of the people said they don't eat, or they bring their own food, which
That's
is a
exactly
shame.
right.
It's a shame, but I also
Yeah.
understand they're wanting to stay safe and protected
Yep.
because you don't know.
Well, plus they're going to get something that they really like to eat. I was doing the culinary for, of all things, a Miss California USA contest years ago. And I'm going to let the listeners know, pageant girls love to eat. They all want to know what their next meal is. It's because their bodies are in the now. But I had this mother call me, like my client said, look, there's a contestant has a lot of allergies. We just gave the mother your phone number. And I'm like, great. So I said, good. So I'll talk to her. That mother caught on the phone. I never in my 25 years heard of anybody. This little girl was allergic to everything but the air. I could have set the phone down, gone up, shower, shampooed, shaved my legs, dried my hair and put on makeup, and came downstairs to pick the phone back up. And she still would have been rattling on. So I just cut her off after about 8 minutes of her going on. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put a refrigerator in her room. I'm going to take the cost of the food off your bill, because there is no way I was going to touch this with having to feed 400 other girls in an off-premise scenario where they were eating under a tent, and that, they were, the off-premise caterers put up a field kitchen, that there's just no way I was going to try to get this girl the food she needed. I told the mother every day, I said, I'll meet you. You call me. I'll come outside. You hand me her food. I'll refrigerate it, and I'll hand it off to her, because these pageant girls, sometimes people spend like $5,000-$6,000 on their being there, on coaching, on the clothes. So like, what happened if she got sick because I fed her something she wasn't supposed to have? And then do I turn around and we have to reimburse the mother for all their expenses because her girl can't compete? So I just said, bring your own food. I'm not touching. It was way beyond my pay grade.
Well, and that's something very important to that conversation to have with that person too, and the catering partners, because sometimes, especially off premise, you don't have a Whole Foods or someplace to go find something, or a kitchen that you can do it. And, so providing an option, that was the best solution for that. And
correct.
As we talk about, accommodating different people, we have to provide a reasonable accommodation. And, if you're doing a party in the middle of, the desert or something like that, you have
it was Palm Springs.
Oh, okay.
Good job.
Okay. So the desert or the beach or wherever, where you don't have a kitchen right there that has some alternative ingredients in it, you really do need to be proactive about that and managing it. So I think you did that was a great solution for that situation.
Well, and the other thing I think the listeners should understand with allergies and special needs, and I know this wasn't the gist, and we'll transition over. And whoever's listening, I will tell you, Tracy and I do this all the time. We just get off on our rants and we have these great dialogues. But the other thing is, I think event planners or anybody in their home entertaining, know your limitations. And if you really can't do it, don't be shy about it. Don't be embarrassed about it. Just say, I really am not going to be able to manage your expectations, because to your point of your survey, I would rather see someone bring their food and be able to heat it up and get the food that they're going to enjoy than sit here and be miserable or pick around on their food or not be able to enjoy their party like everybody else. Or as me saying, well, crap, I'm already cooking for 10 people, or whatever. Now I have to stop what I'm doing to get something to accommodate this person that may not even be what they want. So, just have a very open dialogue, because people, I don't think, are insulted if I were to say to you, you know what, this is not really what I have on my menu. I'm not going to be able to really give you what you want. I have salad. Yeah, I can hold the cheese out. I can make sure that I make you a bowl without the cheese, and you just sort of come to that happy medium that maybe you can eat some of it, but not all of it. And then you bring what you feel what else you would like to have. And I just think people should just be upfront. Don't be embarrassed. Don't bend over backwards to accommodate anybody and I do the same for my events, even of several thousand people. I mean, I really make sure I have a dialogue with those attendees on what's happening, what we can do. And then on the very rare occasion, I will say, let me put a refrigerator in your room. I'm going to have you talk directly to the chef, because I'm trying to accommodate 1,200 other people. I can't get sucked into your vortex, not to be ugly, but there's only one of me. So let's work together to get you accommodated. But I can't stop what I'm doing for every single meal to just focus on this one person. Because that's where I really find at times I get tripped up is, just figuring out a way to make sure that everybody, and I'm not talking about the general stuff. I'm talking about to those people that are allergic to everything but air.
I mean, and there, I've been doing this for 10 years now. And, the biggest complaints from planners are that people don't tell you until they sit down.
Yeah.
And that is a F-bomb kind of dropping scenario, not to be rude about it. But, but one of the other challenges is that those individuals who have dietary needs don't want to be a burden at the same time. But they also don't want to be embarrassed, because there was one story I read, and this was years ago, whatever. Actually somebody answered a survey of mine, and the server came out of the back of the kitchen and yells, "Where's the vegan?" in front of everybody. I'm like, that's, you're embarrassing the crap out of somebody. So, or they've gotten sick. And so they're very concerned about it. But if you want to participate safely and you want to participate, equally in that, you actually have to be forthcoming in providing that information so that Claire and I can actually work with the chefs or put you in touch with the chefs to make sure that we do have something that meets your needs and that can be done in a safe environment. So asking at the last minute is actually making it more unsafe for you than anything else.
Well, and I am finding though that people are getting better about it, because there's so many like conference apps where, and if you are listening and do not post your menus on your conference app, you really need to look at doing that, because then people will go on, see what's being served. And then also on your food items on your conference app, put your, like if it's gluten-free or vegan, the little symbols. So then people then know, oh my gosh, I better say something. And then also too, on registrations, as they're really maturing, and I worked a lot with Delta on this, because we would just put, are you allergic to nuts? Yes or no. But then I went ahead and said, look, tell them what type of nut. I mean, and to get more microscopic on exactly the type of allergy that you are allergic to. The other thing is, while we're on this subject, see, I'm going to stretch out a bunch of things, Tracy, so you have to ask me back to another podcast. There's a method to the madness. But the other thing that I found really interesting too, and dealing with specialty meals, and I've had this, I just started doing this, like all this obviously is a pre-COVID, but this has worked out really well, where I think someone might have already mentioned this on your previous, I did a buffet that was just for special meals. So if you're a vegan, if you're vegetarian, gluten-free, celiac, whatever, then you are, there's a special buffet that you are ticketed or it's on your badge, that you go through that special buffet, and there'll be enough on there for whatever, unless once again you're really extreme, that'll be on there. Because the one thing that I find really annoying is at times the hotels treat these folks like they're afterthought. And, I'm paying for a beautiful meal that I've designed for an awards dinner. And these guys are handed a bowl of pasta with, maybe if you look really closely, there could be a vegetable or two in there. And that's just so rude. So the one thing I've actually started doing is during my menu tastings, I'm addressing it, and I'm wanting to take a look at those plates, because it's really not fair to them. They deserve to have the best guest experience. Or at times I survey them, because they're back in the day, they would be given their tofu, their baked potato, and a glob of what I think was a vegetable, but I'm not quite sure. So I want to make sure that they're getting the same quality, that they shouldn't have to suffer because of their dietary restriction. The last piece of advice I have, and this was at a 5-star hotel in Palm Beach, that I had this happen, and I was unglued, and it changed the way that my halal and kosher meals, they were charging me $150 for a kosher dinner. And I took a look at it one night just to see. There was a bunch left over. I said, you know what? I need to crack this open, see what's going on here. It was beyond disgusting. And I think they got it at Moe's Corner Jewish joint, that it was the worst food ever. And it was totally unedible. And I took it to the chef, and I just looked at him. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And take it off. And I was Jewish right back to him, because I am Jewish. I said, take it off the bill. I'm not paying for these 10 kosher meals at $150 each that are inedible. And moving forward, that's the other thing. I make sure that at a menu tasting, I'm seeing the quality of the kosher meals, and I'm really deep diving into it, because we are all getting charged an immense. And I went on the wrapper, because the name of the caterer was on the wrapper, and looked it up, and just saw they were like a corner place. And it's once again, that quality's got to be in alignment. And I started really addressing that in my menu tastings, where I wanted to see a kosher meal as well, because was just
awesome.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Well, and that's true. And and you're not supposed to open that kosher meal. The person who's eating it is supposed to open it. So unless you address it pre-conference and while you're designing your catering menus, whether it's a gluten-free dish or the kosher meal, you need to talk about that and do a tasting, because so many times on the bottom of the banquet event order, it just says 25 vegan and 2 gluten-free or whatever. Right. And you don't know what they're serving. Right. And it reminds me of that story you and I talked about before, about that sandwich, that somebody was delivered a sandwich and it had 1 piece of cheese on it or something. Yeah.
You got to look closely too. I think it's cheese from last week.
And I love the fact that you took it back to the chef and said, please eat this, because.
Yeah, that was me that did that. I did. I was like, you know what? You need to eat what my guests are eating.
Yeah, exactly. And would you want this if you sat down at a banquet? I'm like, would you be happy with this, for this meal? And take it back to them, because you never know.
Well, for a lot of vegan or vegetarian, if it's not buffet, I actually make them write out on a BEO what that meal is, because if not, they're looking in the back of their free walk-ins on the day of the event on what they can get rid of for the vegetarian and vegan meals. So, and I want to see what it is, because if I'm not happy with it, I can address it in the BEO stage to say, no, let's be a little bit more thoughtful here. So I actually I don't accept 25 vegan meals. It's not okay. I need to see what it is they're doing, because when you're making them really think it through at that time, and they're not, and actually the chefs, although they're not thrilled about having to do extra work on that front side, then that day of the event, they do appreciate it because they're not having to sit down and think about it as they're trying to get out, 1,000, 2,000 meals for a group. It's all there.
That's a great point. And what if chef doesn't show up, right? And
right.
You're leaning on your line cooks with no disrespect to them, but you're leaning on them to say, oh, I got to make something. I don't know how to use aquafaba to make, to replace eggs or something. So they're just going to give them the pasta,
Right. And they don't even know what they don't know. And,
right.
and I have to tell you, my clients have actually started writing into their F&B contracts because, you get involved just like you do. We get involved at different stages, right? And we really try. There's times if I had a nickel actually for every time someone called me and said, we're starting to plan our menus and we realize we're not even close with budget. Like the menus are just way out of our budget. Can you help us, get with the negotiation and menu design? But then they learn, get you involved when you're negotiating your contract, because then I can tell you what to negotiate into your contract and we can do that together. And that really helps out tremendously because some of these extra work points you need to have in. And one of the things, and this is no disrespect to banquet chefs because they're amazing, but a lot of times they only do what they do and their creativity is not there. And I'm finding the last couple of years, their cooking skills are not great. So my clients have actually put in the contract that the executive chef has to be at our tastings. He has to be working our event and he has to be in the kitchen, not sitting in his office, because too many times the executive chefs, and trust me, I love them all to pieces. I really do. But they just rely on our banquet chef. He takes care of it. I've worked at a 5-star hotel in LA, $1 million food budget. And I'm telling you, the menu tasting was horrific. The banquet chef was just not a good quality chef. That we write in the contracts, executive chef has to be at the dance. It's amazing to me how many times executive chefs don't even show up to a menu tasting. And I'm $1 million food spend, and you're going to act like you're going to come in at the end to take a bow and act like you're doing me some favor as an executive chef for showing up at the end of a menu tasting. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of a menu tasting that I did on a site visit. I went with my client to a city that I won't talk about. And we went to 3 different properties, and one of them did a chef table. And the executive chef was there presenting and everything. And the CVB had informed them of my allergies before we got there. And so there were probably 10 of us at the table, the hotel salesperson, the Convention and Visitors Bureau person, me and my 2 clients, and the chef. And the very first meal that came, I couldn't eat anything that they had prepared.
Oh my.
And I'm like, and it wasn't even my client, but it was me. But my client's like, how am I going to, I don't want to work for them if they knew in advance. And then they finally brought me something, but they were mortified. The chef was mortified, which he should be, but it's poor showing and poor consideration of who you're providing for, especially when you're doing this elaborate chef demo for the client trying to get the business and you just lost the business.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. So how did you get into the whole catering side of event planning?
It was, I actually went to hotel school and was working for Hilton out of college in room sales. And I found it just very frustrating because you had no control of the sale on some level. You couldn't say to someone, oh, let me change out the carpeting if you don't like it, or let me change out the curtains or the bedspread. So, and obviously I always, loved food. I worked in purchasing. I worked in the kitchens when I was in college. And I like the idea of catering because you have control over making people happy. You don't like the dessert? Fine. Here's a list of 5 others. Here's what we can do. There was so much more flexibility and creativity around the culinary side that it really was a passion point for me. And I worked at a couple hotels as, catering manager, director of catering. A turning point was working at the Georgia World Congress Center when MGR was there back in the glory days. And the food was so good there. And we were very competitive with the hotels in Atlanta. And you really learn layout, you learn timing. I mean, you're at one of at the time was the third largest convention center in the country. It was not unusual to go through a conference and have, 500 food services in one day. Like that is a busy day at the office.
Mm-hmm.
And you're dealing with the people, they're ordering their quantities, their layout. So you're really fine tuning a tremendous amount of skills, negotiation. So I realized there's a lot of people that didn't understand the culinary space. And this was before all the food networking channels. But, that there was a need for somebody to be an advocate for the customer, that when you got a secretary that called and wanted 20 gallons of coffee and you're like, for how many people? She's like 30. I'm like, you really need 3 at best. So you're constantly giving these people guidance, or, the bougie prima donna that called because she had something at her country club last week during kitchen and bath show, and she wants to serve it in her booth, and meanwhile you're trying to say, well, you understand the food's getting transported a half a mile away, which means it's going to sit in the hot box for an hour and a half before it begins to get served. So I can't really give you the exact item you had at your country club that he made a la minute to the circumstance, but here's what we can do instead. So that's where I came up with RX for catering, is to really give customers a better experience. I'm really being at a convention center for 8 years. You understand quality and quantity and ordering and the whole back of the house scenario and what it takes from the time it goes in the door as ingredients to the time it gets served. So that's why I decided to spin off into that business. And then after that, I obviously got into events. And plus, like at the Congress Center, we did, catering of all sizes and shapes, and exhibit booths on the floor for 10,000 people to small, elegant things for, 20. So it was a really great jump off point that, led me down the yellow brick road, if I should, to the path of where I'm at today. Or, in addition to doing a lot of trade shows and event marketing. And I've been fortunate enough to, work in over 23 countries around the world and throughout the US for everything, wedding. I did Michael Phelps's wedding. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. So that's it in a nutshell. So thank you for asking.
You're welcome. So in all of that experience that you have, what nuggets do you have in, for planners to use to negotiate food and beverage?
Yeah, I've got a ton, but I'm going to start off. I'm just going to do a couple jump off for every planner to that I cannot stress this enough. And when I do my talks on F&B to MPIs and Connect and IMAXs and stuff, is understand your history. You got to understand the rear view mirror before you look out the windshield, and also understand what works for your group. Because I've seen a lot of people want to get really trendy and hip and happening, and that's not what their group does. Like that's not it for their group. So understand your group and work within that understanding. And also, so basically what I really tell people is get your old BEOs, get your old catering bill. Even if you're new to the organization, find out a little bit of your group history, where you've been at before, call those venues and ask them to send you your BEOs in your billing. The other thing is, and then look at it, put it, even if you have to put on a spreadsheet on, what type of alcohol your group really drinks. I mean, I can tell you several of my clients, they're going to drink beer, what type of beer, what of their vodka drinkers, or, what exactly it is they're drinking, how much coffee. My Honeywell client, they will drink coffee till the cow comes home. It blows everybody away on how much coffee they drink. So really look at the BEOs, even if you have to put a spreadsheet on how much coffee gets was used. Now, don't look at the BEO, look at the bill, the banquet bill, where they have everything registered out. So that's a good jump off. And this way too, when you go to negotiate F&B, you have an idea what it is you want to negotiate. You may not want to do 10% off your entire bill. You may want to do 20% off a coffee because you drink so much of it that's a better cost savings for you. And coffee is such a high profit margin. Several of my clients have realized that they bring in their own soda products in water. This way, then they negotiate a corkage fee. I had one week-long conference that I did that we negotiated that, ended up giving him a $50,000 cost saving. Plus, not only is it $50,000 on the product, but it was plus service charge and taxes that also got cost savings. Now, you're still meeting your food and beverage minimum. You're not renegotiating your food and beverage minimum, but it allows you to put more money into other areas, which helps tremendously.
Yeah.
I've also, and I know, Tracy, you've seen this too, flow water machines have been a huge hit with several of my clients, where those are, for those that are not familiar with flow water, and there's other competitor brands out there. These are water machines that you give people water bottles, or you put glasses near them, and then they go and get a glass of water fresh out of the water machine, as opposed to bottled waters. That saves a tremendous amount of money. And it also, the machines are so cool because it shows like how many bottles that you saved. So all that tends to be really fun because you're also giving back to the environment. Continuing on with negotiation, the reason why I like people really dissecting their last year's F&B is that it gives them a blueprint on maybe where they want to negotiate. Now, there's two forms of thoughts when you're negotiating your contract. You either get like 10% off the F&B bill, or you get last year's menu pricing. I tell people to go with the 10% because that's going to give them a better cost savings, because it's very rare that last year's menu pricing is going to go up by 10%. So I think the 10% tends to be better. Now, if you have other little niblets that you can give the venue, then, and you are doing a lot of coffee, there's been times where I've said we've negotiated like 10% off the coffee prices. Labor, we negotiate that into the contract. If you're doing $750 in bar sales, that the bartender gets waived. I've also very strictly put into contracts as well that any kitchen labor is truly people from the kitchen, not chef attendants. Be careful. That can be very dodgy. I worked an event in California where the banquet waiter, we visited at lunchtime, and by that evening he had a chef's jacket on and is carving. And I questioned him about it, and he goes, "Oh no, I'm trained to be a carver. But you know what? If I'm paying for a chef, I want a chef." I also put in a contract that they have to be engaging and speak good English or the language of the attendees. I've had a lot of problems where they are very, very shy. They don't speak to the guests. And I go up to try to talk to them, and they are not English speaking. So
that can make a break an event. I mean, because they're
Sure.
the front-facing person to your attendees.
Correct.
And if you can't if your attendees can't communicate to them, whether a server or one of those carving action station people, that can really, put discomfort in people.
Absolutely. And it's part, I'm paying $250,
Right.
like the chef fees are just, I think, ridiculous. I get that you're pulling someone from your kitchen. I understand the need for it, but $250 for somebody that is not trained at all to do it. And I don't care what brand of property I'm at. It happens everywhere. That they're part of an engagement, and they're part of making sure the guests have a great experience.
Right.
So I'm paying for that. So there's a lot of times where I go back and I renegotiate that fee a lot. one thing that's really interesting too, that not a lot of people do it, and I'm going to say don't do it unless you really are a trained professional. But I've gone back and renegotiated service fees after the event. You will never get those negotiated in contracts, so don't try it. You can't go in and say, hey, we're going to be doing this, but I don't want to pay 24% service charge. I'm only going to pay 22. Can't do it because it's union. There's lots of reasons behind it, but I will let them know, and I'll do it in BEO in front of everybody on BEO review. I will say, I am paying 24, 25. I guarantee you're going to see it started going up to 26. So therefore, I better want for nothing. And I make it really clear. And if I want for the slightest thing at your very high service fees, then I'm telling you, I'm coming back and I'm not paying 26%, 25, 24 if I'm not getting that level of service. And I will tell you, a lot of times I go back and I take pictures of things and I write down examples and I sit down and I renegotiate it. Because if you're charging me it, then I better be getting the service warranted, because it's amazing the amount of stupidity that goes on in banqueting departments across the board. And my number one pet peeve, and I stop people all the time, especially captains. I say, where's your paperwork? Oh, it's back in the office. I said, then how do you know what's being served out here is right if I don't cancel your paperwork? But I also tell them in the BEO review with banqueting, I tell them my expectation levels. I say, do not let me catch you without your paperwork.
Yeah.
Never.
Very true. Yeah. And that also then ties into servers. How many times have you seen a server pull out their paperwork to answer a question or to check on something, but they've only been trained for 10 minutes before they go on the floor?
All the time.
So you have to set that expectation, up front, contract point and or BEO review, before the show opens, so that people do have that expectation. And, when you're in Vegas, there's the A, B, and C level servers, C's are on call. So you can say, I only want A servers. And I know that's across the country as well, but you do have to put those stipulations in to set the expectations. And that comes with your RFPs, that comes with your contracts and your site visits as well.
Absolutely. The one thing that's a couple other things that are tremendous pet peeves for me, besides someone's not carrying their paperwork, and this one makes me crazy, is I will sit and BEO review, and I've tried to put this in contracts, but I haven't been successful with it, that whoever captain-wise is working my event, chef-wise who's working my event, everyone needs to sit in when we do, usually after pre-con, you do the huge BEO review. Everybody there better be sitting in my BEO and taking notes, because I will go over everything with a fine-tooth comb about bowls. When are things leaving the kitchen? What does it look like? How many portions are you putting out at a time? Because, how big the plates are. I'll get to that in a second. Like, we go over it all. And then all of a sudden, but they refuse for some reason, and it's hotels primarily. Oh, those people are off today. We're not paying to bring them in. Meanwhile, it's a $500,000, $600,000, $800,000 food spend. Bring them in for the couple-hour meeting. Because here's what happens: the chef, the banquet manager, all the time. Oh, I'm going to take notes, and I tell them, fine, but do not send a captain out here to have me go over it with them. This way I can get it the way I want it. I'm going over it now. Don't ask me to do my job twice. And I will tell you, it happens every single time that they say they'll take all the notes. They don't, or they're off. And the captains always come up to you. Claire, can we go over, I know you're really particular, or you have your way on how you want this done. Can we go over with it? Can you spend some time with me so I know I can get it just right? And I say, no, like, go back to your boss and get him to do it. Like, it's
Right.
amazing how the managers too, like they want us not be client facing, they send the captain. So it ends up being a problem because they don't want to spend the money to bring in the whole team, especially knowing that myself and people like you, like us, are going to be very specific so it gets done right the first time and not having to continually go in and retweak and redo and etc. So I know I'm sounding very fussy and high maintenance, but I got a lot of miles under my belt.
Okay, so those are all such great ideas and things that we, need to take into consideration. And I think one of the things that I've been saying for years is this is our number one expenditure.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that we usually meeting planners spend the least amount of time on. And that just floors me. And I'm guilty of that as myself,
Yep.
way back. But, if we're spending this much money on it, and especially with that service fee added on, I mean, that's a quarter percent of your fee.
Huge.
Already added onto it. You should be paying more attention to it. And that goes with, dietary needs, kosher meals, sustainability.
Halal.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind boggling that we don't. So being nitpicky about it, I think, and I don't mean that meanly, but
Nope.
Being particular about your expectations is super important.
Well, nobody can ping you on it because you let them know up front. And, and it depends on the size of the group, but some of my biggest mistakes is just assuming and I know a lot of planners do this, and you're right for thinking about it, but don't make the mistake. But a lot of folks also think, oh, I'm at the Four Seasons, or I'm at the Ritz-Carlton, the St. Regis, wherever, and I'm not going to insult them by, questioning this. Question it. If you're not comfortable with it, question it. And the other thing is with food and beverage, and you are so right by saying it's a quarter, so it's one of the largest expenditures, is that the other thing about what made me head down this rabbit hole is it's a huge expenditure, but it's also the one that gets noticed the most. When you walk in after any event and you're seeing your friend, oh, how was the conference? Good. How was the food? It just gets asked. So that's one of the reasons too, is one of my superpowers is I'm a great negotiator, but I'm really creative with culinary menus and giving a different guest experience, but in alignment with the guest comfort level.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go crazy, planners that are listening this on, oh, this is so trendy, I got to do this. Don't, because also what's trendy when you go to your favorite watering hole or restaurant or pub may not translate accordingly for a banqueting or group experience. So also think of food as a form of communication. And unless you can clearly communicate what it is you want people to know about what's they're being served, don't do it. It's going to fall real flat, and you're going to be the one with the egg on your face. So just be really careful about making sure what your choices are, or if the venue isn't comfortable with it, you got to pay attention to it. But I also, just because I've been doing it for so long, know whenever they're being lazy. There's times where they're just being lazy about it, and they're not, and this isn't all venues, but they got a lot of stuff going on. They don't want to really go that extra mile. They're like, oh, we can't do that. And it's like, oh, I'm thinking you can, so you just got to learn when the difference is. And as much as I'm talking about chefs and venues and banqueting people, I got to say, I get along great with those folks. Like, these guys, even though I ride them hard, when I go to leave, I'm so fortunate because I get hugs and I get told that I made them better for spending that week with them. I gave them ideas. They're motivated, to there's a bunch of new things that we're always trying in terms of food and presentation and, seeing how the guests like the food. The one thing I encourage planners to do as well is I tend to walk around a lot, especially during plated meals, and I ask banquets, I don't care at that point what's going out, because by that time, as Tracy, we live and breathe it. I'm more interested in what's going back. So I ask them, I go, what was left the most of on their plate? What did you see? Like everybody, like what items did people lick the bowl on? And they're great. Like banquets gets really excited because you become a partner with them, because you really take an interest in their job, what people were doing, what they're eating, and that you're engaging them, because it really helps me too to know. And then also if a lot of something comes back, I'm going to sort of sit down and talk to the chef about it, because maybe something, or even ask some of the attendees that I care about, that or know who I know, or you start talking to, ask them about it. So they'll let me know, like, oh, that was way too salty, or, and I'm also tasting the food as well. There's a lot of times where I'll go back in the kitchen, on the front side of food going out, and take a bite of several things, or chefs will pull me in to say, hey, what do you think? Just so like if anything needs slightly course corrected, we're doing it before it even goes out. So
that's a great idea. And, and following up, and I like how you said it, seeing what's coming back, even with buffets,
Oh yeah.
Because why spend money on food that your attendees don't eat?
Correct.
So if they don't, I used it as an example the other day, if they don't eat croissants, if that's the thing that's getting sent back, or those danishes with the cheese in the middle of it, if they don't eat them, don't buy them next time, because you just threw out food as well as your budget.
Correct. Oh, and try to put in your contract that at least your breakfast breads can get replated to go out for the AM coffee break.
Yep.
It's weird you said croissants and Danish, because I quit using them years ago. I don't put them out. I don't use them. Nobody wants them. I go more to coffee cake, pound cake's great, crumb cake in the morning. Donut holes are always fun, because people can eat 2 of them without feeling really guilty. And, but I haven't used croissants in years, because I got them all back. Now, one of the things I do a lot of too is, I am that nerdy girl that I break it down. Like, I don't do assorted cookies. I will tell them what percentage. I take everything on 100% and say, if we're just doing, say, 10 dozen cookies, I will say, I want 7 dozen chocolate chip, 2 dozen oatmeal raisin, 1 dozen sugar or ginger. But I break that down because I know what percentages of things my people eat. Why? Because I know what comes back.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I know, and I stand there during coffee breaks and I watch people, what they're eating. So I know, and I also know, and I've actually won money from the Omni Hotel in Atlanta on a bet years ago, that they said that the brownies go over more than cookies. And I said, no, they don't. And I bet them. And I ended up, yes, I did. I most certainly did take their $5. I wasn't even polite about it. I just held up my hand.
All right. Well, we're coming up to, the end of this conversation, which we could talk about for more hours in the day. So give people like 2 more quick tips on, what they can do, contract wise or negotiation wise on their budgets. And then what are some resources that you utilize to stay up on food and beverage trends?
I use you as a source.
Thanks.
You just gave me that lead to get on that webinar just now. That was really great. The 2 other tips for food and beverage negotiation, or just to extend your dollars, is I'm a big fan of bulk. And I know like we shouldn't be saying that in a COVID world, but I like bulk product. What a lot of people really, really don't do is they don't pay attention to on consumption, because counting on consumption and beverage inventory. And by the way, if you ever want to do a second one with me on like a little snippet on beverage inventory, I can really talk about this that people will really learn a lot.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Pay attention to find out well in advance what items are considered on consumption and what isn't.
Okay.
That's helpful with your ordering because different people have different elements. Some people will do yogurt on consumption, others won't. So it's just, and this is going to change really coming out of COVID as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot to be said about understanding on consumption. And the other tip, and I'm telling you, because my clients will hire someone like myself or you that is going to sit there and babysit the culinary, especially coming out of COVID, because it's worth our day rates or our rates. We're going to give you such a huge cost savings. Like I told you, at one client, one move I made for them was a $50,000 savings that changed how they moved forward or allowed us to have a much better food and beverage experience because we didn't have to put all that money into their sodas and water, that we were able to upgrade a lot of their culinary experience, et cetera. That by hiring someone with this expertise, it really allows you to give your folks a better F&B experience. The planners learn a lot from us. I'm all the time getting calls from my clients just saying, look, I don't really need you for this. It's just a quick dinner, but I have a quick question for you, or what do you think about this? So hiring someone when you do have, and don't get caught up like, oh, I don't have the budget for this, because we're going to come in and give you such cost savings that, and you don't need to worry about it. You as a planner can enjoy the conference a little bit more or put your efforts elsewhere while someone is paying attention to the culinary to make sure that the buffet layouts are being done properly, the flow of the food on the buffet is being properly, dietary is being handed up. We are watching the bills every single day. I do my bill reviews every single day. So when I leave the property, even if it's $1 million, $2 million food spend, the bill's ready to get paid. So that's just huge. And the banqueting and chefs appreciate having a dedicated person that really knows what they're doing. So that is really probably one of the larger cost savings, is bringing somebody on to manage this for you that's going to be paying attention, getting a good understanding on consumption. And I have a whole other talk that I did at Connect about catering in a COVID world on tips and tricks on culinary as we're coming out of catering, on what that looks like and suggestions on what we should be doing to better maximize the food and beverage spend. What motivates me is listening to really good quality webinars out there. I think there's a lot of bad ones, and podcasts. And then also when I'm doing a lot of menu design, I love BizBash and Smart Meetings. BizBash is great for, they do a great job.
Some of the pictures they show of people's creativity, like the orange walls, I know that was like 8 years ago, but some of the pictures that they get from clients around the country are amazing, what they've done.
BizBash? Yeah. I turn a lot of my clients on to BizBash because I'm just a big fan of that. I'm a big fan. They actually asked me to write an article. I need to do it. I do like, I will tell you, it's maybe not be applicable, but the webinars, Exhibitor Magazine has been doing some really great webinars. Travis is amazing.
He is.
Actually, I wrote an article from him that was on their website about trade shows and catering in a COVID, as we're coming out of COVID, what does that look like? If you do food in your booth, I wrote a great article for Travis. And then like when I'm doing menu design, I really just go on a lot it depends on the city I'm going to, but I
Mhm.
go on to Thrillist and Eater, and also depends too on what the client's wanting to do. And, we really try to pull some creativity into the culinary, and also like some of the messaging. Delta had to obviously cancel their global sales conference, but one of the things that we were looking at doing is really pulling in some of the key tag lines that some of their executives liked into the food. Bob Summers, who's a global vice president of sales, he uses the word sticky a lot, like, become sticky with your customers. So
Uh-huh.
we were going to get a cute little pop-up that talked about being sticky with your customers, and a quote from Bob about stickiness next to some little bite-sized sticky buns. So
Oh,
really
that's
pulling some of those creative elements from the theme. I just was asked to bid on something, and I actually said no to it. But the company has this, like, the word was intersection that the company was it was like a really big theme within this company. It was a planning company that asked me to bid on something, but it didn't work out. But I loved the idea. I was going to do a lot of international street foods because it was an international tech company, that I was going to use the word intersection a lot with the vignettes of making it a famous intersection with the various cities around the world with the food vignette, and then also talking about how you intersect, as simple as intersecting a Coke with rum and a lime, but
yeah.
doing this fun play off the intersect. So it's sort of fun, the creativity that you can pull off of, but based upon what's happening in the company, and really continuing that messaging, if you will.
I love that. And the other last week or the week before, I posted out MeetingsNet, put out the colors of 2021 that Pantone did, which is a
Yep.
gray and a yellow. And how can you incorporate that into your food and beverage, or how can you incorporate those colors into your event programming for this year? And I posted it out there. I'm like, what would you serve to go with that? Right. And so some
Yeah.
people are like, hey, this food would go really good on, when it's sitting on top of these colors. And I'm like, yeah, but what about yellow foods, yellow squashes, or what's
Yeah.
gray, and how can you have fun with that? So not only the theme wise and I love that sticky, because my first thing was sticky rice, so what
Yeah.
did you do?
I love sticky rice.
So do I. But you can be creative with your food and beverage, and it doesn't have to be expensive at the same either when
Now,
you're doing.
people get it. Like, the attendees really, really get it if it's done appropriately. And once again, they understand what it is you want them to know about it. So I tell people, don't try it at home unless you really are confident it's going to hit, or you've got a trained professional to do it for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So one final question that I always ask people is, what is your favorite food and beverage? And since you've been doing this for 23 years, I would think that it's hard for you to choose, but what is it?
Crab legs.
Oh,
It's probably my favorite food. I love crab.
okay.
I don't like Dungeness. I'm not a fan of Dungeness, but I like king crab, and I lump crab
Mhm.
all day, every day. Is my favorite food. I also really love a good gazpacho and mango. So I know that's a couple. I probably should have said everything when you said food. You should ask us too what our least favorite food is.
So what is your least favorite food?
Probably lima beans.
I love lima beans.
Of course you do. You're Tracy. You're this.
My grandmother used to make the best succotash, and we cannot figure out how she did it. And unfortunately, she's been passed away for 12 years, so I have no idea.
I know. It's always after the ship has sailed. You're like, darn, why didn't I get that recipe? I did the same thing after my mother died. It's like, oh, we should have thought about that.
Yeah.
I don't, I know I have, I couldn't, there's some things I just couldn't do. My favorite beverage, I like a really good homemade lemonade. I think is truly lovely with like some mint or basil in it. I really love a great lemonade.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do a great for banqueting, a great make your own lemonade station. It's really like for smaller groups, it's super fun. Yeah, I did it from some oncologists. It was the hit.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, I loved it. I want to get out of the line and back to the line again. So I can get. I'm gonna run to the back of the line and wait for my turn to come back again. This was so much fun, and I hope your listeners really enjoy it.
I know they will. There's so many good nuggets on how to save money with food and beverage, and it's so important, and especially with it being our number one expenditure on beverage on our event budget. So
Yep.
Thanks everybody for listening. This is Claire Gould with RX for Events. 25 years of experience helping us cater our food and beverage to be fabulous.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is the Eating and a Meeting podcast that you're listening to. You can find us on all podcast platforms. And you can join the Eating and a Meeting Facebook group. Just go search for Eating and a Meeting. Also, find out more information about my online course called Every Meal Matters, where we dive deep into how to create safe, inclusive, and sustainable food and beverage events. And that you can find that at academy.thrivemeetings.com. Until next time, thanks and have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.